He wasn't supposed to survive, but somehow, he did. The words dropped out of my mouth before I even knew I was speaking them. I didn't mean for them to hang there in the air like they did, so heavy and raw. I had never seen that much blood on the road before. Not like that. Not pooling under a tiny broken body like someone had knocked over a can of red paint onto the gray of the asphalt. Not like this, with the little chest rising and falling in the most fragile rhythm I'd ever witnessed. It was a quiet Saturday morning in early spring. The kind where the sun is warm but not hot yet, and the air carries a faint promise of green grass and freshly tilled soil. I had gone out for a jog. Nothing unusual, just my usual route that wrapped around the edge of our little town of Maple Ridge, West Virginia. We're a sleepy kind of place. Not a lot of excitement. The kind of town where people still wave when they pass each other in their trucks, and old folks sit on porches and watch the days go by. But that morning, everything felt off. Maybe it was how quiet it was. No dogs barking, no birds chirping, just the sound of my shoes hitting the pavement and my own breathing. I didn't hear the car, didn't see anything at first. Just a shape like a brown shadow crumpled along the edge of the road near the ditch. It wasn't until I got closer that I saw him. A dog. Small, young, maybe 8 months old if I had to guess. A mutt with a tan coat speckled with patches of white and a tail that lay limp in the grass. His back legs were twisted in a way they shouldn't have been, and his eyes, they were open, watching, not blinking, just watching. I dropped to my knees beside him. My first instinct was to look around, to find someone, anyone. But there was no one. Just me, this road, and a dying dog. I reached out with shaking hands and hovered over his head. I didn't know if touching him would make it worse. I didn't know what to do. I'm not a vet. I build cabinets for a living. But I could see the rise and fall of his chest, could see his mouth twitch, and those eyes, those terrible, bright, beautiful eyes. They weren't afraid. They weren't in pain. Not exactly. They were waiting. I pulled my hoodie off and used it to lift him as gently as I could. He whimpered once, just once, then went quiet again. My truck was a quarter-mile away, parked at the trailhead. I ran, cradling him in my arms, feeling the heat of his blood seep into the fabric. Every step, I kept thinking, he won't make it. He won't make it. But when I got to the truck and opened the door, he was still breathing. I didn't even think about calling ahead. Just drove straight to the Maple Ridge Animal Hospital, tires screeching as I pulled into the lot. The receptionist looked up, startled, and I just yelled, "Hit by a car! Still breathing, please!" They moved fast after that. 2 vet techs ran out. One grabbed him from my arms. The other opened the door to the back. I tried to follow, but they told me to wait. So I did. I sat in the lobby, hands shaking, heart pounding like I had run a marathon. His blood was on my hands, on my hoodie, on the seat of my truck, everywhere. An hour passed, maybe more. I couldn't remember. At some point, a woman sat beside me, said she was the vet. Dr. Karen Blakely. She looked tired, but kind. "We stabilized him," she said. "He has multiple fractures, internal bleeding. He's in rough shape, but he's fighting." I asked if he had a chip. He didn't. No collar either. No one had called or come in looking for a missing dog. He was alone, and I couldn't leave him like that. "I'll cover his care," I said. I didn't think. I just said it. I didn't know how much it would cost. I didn't care. She looked at me like I was crazy, but she nodded. We'll do everything we can. They did. That little dog, he made it through the night. Then another, and another. He had 3 surgeries in 5 days, pins in his hips, a cast on one leg. But he lived. He made it. I visited every day, brought him cooked chicken when they said he could eat again, sat beside his kennel and talked to him. He never barked, never growled, just watched me with those same wide eyes, like he already knew me, like we had been through something together. They let me bring him home on the 10th day. He couldn't walk yet, had to be carried everywhere. But he wagged his tail when he saw me. First time I'd seen that tail move. I named him Chance, because that's what he got, and what he gave me. I live alone, always have. Grew up in Maple Ridge, never left. My folks passed a few years ago and I stayed in the house. It was quiet, too quiet sometimes. I used to think that was a good thing. But after Chance came, the quiet felt different, emptier. I set up a little bed for him in the living room, made sure it was close to the heater, propped him up with blankets so he wouldn't roll. I slept on the couch beside him that first week, woke every time he whimpered, carried him outside to go to the bathroom, learned how to change his bandages and give meds without making him flinch. He started eating more, wagged his tail more. One day he licked my hand. Just once. But it meant the world. 2 months in, he stood on his own, wobbly, like a baby deer. But he did it. Took a few steps, then a few more. I cried that night, didn't even try to hide it. The town started to notice. Folks at the diner asked how he was doing. The mailman, Pete, started leaving dog biscuits in the box. Karen's daughter, Ellie, came by after school to help walk him. Chance had fans, but not everyone was thrilled. My neighbor, Hank, made a comment one day when he saw me lifting Chance into the truck. Still wasting time on that crippled mutt? I didn't say anything, just got in the truck and drove off. But it stayed with me. Chance wasn't a waste. He was the best thing that had ever happened to me. He didn't just heal. He grew, got stronger, learned commands, chased balls, made friends with a 3-legged lab at the dog park. His limp never fully went away, but it didn't stop him. Nothing did. We started taking long walks together. People in town knew him by name. Someone even made him an Instagram account. Chance the Miracle Dog. It went viral. Suddenly we were on the local news. Then a morning show in Charleston. People sent letters, toys, donations to the animal hospital. Someone painted a mural of Chance outside the vet clinic. It showed him with a tiny crown on his head and the words, "Still here," underneath. But none of that changed who he was, or who I was. He still slept at my feet every night. Still waited by the door when I went to work, still curled up beside me on the couch, like he owned the place. Then, one day, something strange happened. We were walking past the old bridge near the edge of town. Chance stopped, stared at a beat-up pickup parked by the trees. His ears went up. Then he growled, real low. A man stepped out of the truck, older, beard, wore a flannel shirt and a ball cap. He looked at Chance, then at me. "That your dog?" he asked. I said yes. He nodded, looked like he was about to say something, then shook his head and turned back toward his truck. Chance barked once, loud. The man stopped, looked back. I think I hit him," he said. "A while ago, thought he was dead." I didn't know what to say. Neither did he. We stood there for a long minute. Then he just got in his truck and drove away. I don't know if it was guilt or something else, but Chance didn't bark again. Just walked beside me like nothing had happened. That night, I sat on the porch with him, watching the stars come out. I thought about all the ways that day could have gone. If I hadn't gone jogging, if I hadn't seen him, if he'd given up. But he didn't. He held on. And now he was mine. Not because I saved him, but because we saved each other. It was a Tuesday morning when Chance surprised me again. I was in the garage finishing up a cabinet set for the Johnsons over on Maple Street. The radio was playing low in the background, some old tune from the 70s, and I had my head down, sanding the edges of a drawer. I wasn't expecting visitors. Didn't hear the screen door creak or the soft click of paws on the wooden floor until I turned and found him there, just standing in the doorway. He was holding something in his mouth, a small, weathered tennis ball, the green fuzz nearly worn down to the rubber. I hadn't seen that thing in weeks. I thought he'd lost it behind the shed, or buried it like he sometimes did when he got too excited. But there it was, in his mouth, and he was staring at me like he expected something. I put the sander down. "You want to play?" I asked. He dropped the ball at my feet and wagged his tail. So we played. For almost an hour, I tossed that beat-up ball across the yard, and Chance bounded after it. Not fast, not like other dogs might, but with this determined kind of hop step that was all his own. His back leg still didn't work quite right, but he'd learned to use it just enough to keep going. He came back each time, tongue out, chest heaving, but ready for more. That day turned into a pattern. Every morning after breakfast, he'd find that tennis ball and bring it to me. Sometimes he'd set it beside my boots. Sometimes he'd toss it onto my lap with a little bark. And every time, I gave in. I put the work aside, played with him. It became our thing. I don't know when I started planning around him, but I did. I stopped taking out-of-town jobs, turned down the ones that required overnight stays. My clients understood. A few joked that Chance was my new foreman. In a way, he was. He had this way of knowing when I needed a break, when I was pushing myself too hard, when I needed to sit down and just breathe. He'd come over and nudge my hand, lay his head on my knee until I stopped. And when I did, when I sat with him in the grass or on the porch, it was like everything else faded away. One afternoon in June, Ellie came by after school. She was carrying a small bag, and her face was lit up with excitement. "I made him a bandana," she said. It was blue, with white stars stitched into the fabric. Not perfect, but sweet in that handmade way that showed she cared. She tied it around Chance's neck, and he looked up at her like he knew she'd made it just for him. "He looks like a little superhero," she said, giggling. "He is one," I replied, smiling more than I had in days. Chance strutted around the yard that day like he owned it, like he knew he was being admired. And maybe he did. People started stopping by more often. Not just neighbors. Strangers. Folks who'd heard about Chance online or from the news segment. They'd come by with treats, toys, cards. Some just wanted to see him. One woman, Carol, drove 3 hours from upstate just to take a picture with him. At first it felt strange. I wasn't used to the attention. Neither was Chance. But he handled it better than I did. He greeted every person with a wag and a sniff, sat still for photos, let children pet him gently. One little boy, maybe 6 years old, with braces on both legs, sat down beside him on the porch steps. Didn't say anything, just rested his hand on Chance's back. They stayed like that for 10 minutes. Then the boy looked up and whispered, "He walks like me." That one got me. I had to excuse myself and step inside for a minute. These moments kept stacking up. People weren't just coming for a dog. They were coming for something else. Something Chance gave off without even trying. Hope, maybe. Or peace. Or the simple comfort of knowing that sometimes, even the broken get another chance. That fall, Dr. Blakely invited us to a fundraiser the clinic was hosting. They were expanding, opening a new wing for emergency care, and they wanted Chance to be the honorary guest. I wasn't sure about it at first. Crowds weren't really my thing, but she assured me it would be laid back, mostly locals. So we went. I brushed him out the night before, made sure his nails were trimmed. Ellie gave him a new bandana, this one red with gold trim. He looked sharp, regal almost. When we walked into the town hall, people clapped. Chance stopped in the doorway, ears up, looking around like he wasn't sure what was going on. Then he trotted forward, head high, tail wagging, like he knew it was all for him. They had a little platform set up with a banner that read, "Maple Ridge Heroes." Chance sat up there like a champ, posed for more photos than a politician, and even got a little plaque with his name on it. After the speeches, a man came up to me, middle-aged, clean-cut, with a firm handshake, said his name was Brent. "I was the one who found that news clip about Chance and sent it to my cousin," he explained. "She works in PR in Charleston. That's how the station picked it up." I thanked him. He just smiled. "Dogs like yours. They remind people that there's good in the world. We need that now more than ever." I nodded, not sure what to say. He wasn't wrong. Things had felt heavy lately. The news, the noise, all of it. But somehow, Chance made people feel lighter. Even me. That night, after the fundraiser, I sat on the porch with Chance at my side. The moon was full, the stars bright. He leaned his head on my knee like he always did, and I scratched behind his ear. "You tired, buddy?" He huffed out a breath and blinked slowly. I took that as a yes. We were just about to go inside when I noticed a car slowing down in front of the house. An older sedan, tan. The headlights flicked off, and the driver parked at the curb. A woman stepped out. Short, maybe in her 50s. She had a scarf around her neck and carried a small purse. She stood there for a second, looking at the porch. Then she walked up. "Hi," she said softly. "Sorry to bother you. Are you the man with the dog? The one from the news?" I stood. Chance stayed beside me, alert but calm. "Yeah, that's him. Chance." Her eyes welled up. I think he might be the puppy we lost last year." I froze. She reached into her purse and pulled out a photograph. It showed a young boy, maybe 10, hugging a puppy that looked so much like Chance it made my heart stumble. Same ears, same white patch on the forehead, same soulful eyes. "His name was Bandit," she said. "He ran off during a thunderstorm. We searched for weeks, put up signs, called every shelter." I knelt down and looked at Chance. "Buddy?" He didn't move, didn't react. Just sat there. The woman crouched beside him, held out her hand. He sniffed it, then looked at me. "May I?" she asked. I nodded. She stroked his head. whispered his old name. Then again, but there was no spark, no recognition, just politeness. He stood, walked over to me and leaned against my leg. She smiled through her tears. He's yours now. I can see that. He chose you. I offered her a chair. We talked for a while. She told me about her son, about how hard it had been losing Bandit. But seeing Chance alive, happy, whole in his own way, it brought her something. Closure, maybe. Before she left, she hugged me. Thank you for loving him. After she drove away, I sat for a long time, thinking, wondering. Maybe he was Bandit, maybe he wasn't. In the end, it didn't matter. He was Chance now, and he was home. Winter came early that year. The first snow fell before Thanksgiving. Chance had never seen snow before. The way he bounded into it, tail flying, nose buried in every drift, you'd think he'd discovered buried treasure. He dragged me outside every morning, made trails through the yard, barked at snowflakes, tried to catch them with his tongue. I bought him a coat, navy blue, had his name stitched into the side. He hated it at first, but after a week, he seemed to understand it kept him warm, especially during our long walks. We started exploring the woods behind the house more. There was an old trail that curved along the ridge, mostly used by deer and the occasional hiker. I cleared it up a bit, and it became our route. Quiet, peaceful. One afternoon, we heard something in the trees, a high-pitched whine. Chance went still, ears up. Then he bolted. I called for him, ran after him, found him standing beside a hollow log. Inside was a puppy, small, shivering, probably only a few weeks old. I carried her home in my jacket. She had no collar, no chip, just a matted coat and eyes too tired for her age. We named her Millie, and just like that, our little home grew. Chance took to her like a big brother. He let her climb on him, chew his ears, steal his toys. He taught her how to walk the trail, how to chase a ball, how to sit still when the vet came by. The house was louder now, messier, but happier too. I never planned for any of this. Never thought a quiet jog on a spring morning would turn into this wild, beautiful, unexpected journey. But Chance did. Somehow he knew. He brought me back to life. And maybe, just maybe, I was doing the same for him. The sun was just beginning to rise when Chance nudged my arm with his nose. I'd been awake for a while already, listening to the quiet sounds of Millie snoring from the foot of the bed. Chance stood beside me, tail wagging slow and steady, eyes bright with anticipation. He didn't bark. He never did unless something was wrong. But he had a way of communicating that didn't need words or noise. I rubbed my eyes and sat up. "You want to go early, huh?" He turned and padded softly toward the door. Millie stirred as I stood. Her ears perked up, and when she saw Chance, she bounced off the bed like a spring. She always followed him. That morning, the frost had crept onto the window panes, leaving thin patterns like cracked glass. Winter was settling in deep. I pulled on my boots and layered up before filling 2 thermoses, one for me, one with warm broth for them, and we headed out. The trail behind the house had become a ritual for us. I'd started calling it the Ridge Walk. It wasn't anything special, just a winding path through the woods, but to us, it might as well have been a holy place. We walked it nearly every day, no matter the weather. I brought my thoughts. They brought their joy. It was the one thing that always cleared my head. That morning, the forest was still, no wind, just the crunch of snow under our boots and paws. I let Chance lead, as always. Millie followed just behind him, hopping over little mounds like she was dancing. We stopped at our usual rest spot, a flat rock near the edge of the ridge that overlooked the town. You could see all of Maple Ridge from there. The water tower, the church steeple, even the blinking lights from the diner's sign if it was still dark enough. I poured the broth into their travel bowls and sipped my coffee while they lapped at their warm treat. There was something about that view, especially when the town below was quiet, that made me feel small in the best kind of way, like the world was big and gentle and still had room for softness. That day, we stayed out longer than usual. On the way back, I noticed a sign posted to one of the old pines near the trailhead. It hadn't been there the day before. Bright yellow, laminated. Missing dog, golden retriever. Answers to Sunny. Last seen near Hollow Road. If found, call. I took a picture with my phone and noted the number. Millie sniffed at the base of the tree, then trotted ahead. Chance lingered, staring up at the sign like he understood. We got back to the house and I fed them breakfast, then sat at the table staring at that picture on my phone. Sunny. The dog looked healthy, well-groomed. Someone loved her. Someone was waiting. I called the number. A man answered. His voice cracked when I said I'd seen the sign. We talked for a while. He said they'd only had her for a year. She'd darted out of the yard when the gate didn't latch. He and his wife had searched every day since. They had no kids, just Sunny. Said she was the heart of their home. I told him I'd keep an eye out. Gave him my name and address just in case. After I hung up, I looked at Chance. He was lying in the sunbeam near the door, eyes half closed. I remembered the day I found him. How alone he'd been. How helpless. I stood and walked over, knelt beside him, and scratched his chest. Let's go find her. The next few days, we adjusted our routine. Instead of walking the ridge walk, we circled the fields near Hollow Road. We checked under porches, behind barns, around sheds. I brought flyers and handed them out at the gas station, the feed store, the post office. Everyone promised to keep watch. One afternoon, while Millie sniffed through a pile of leaves near an abandoned shed, Chance stiffened. He stood stock still, ears forward. Then he let out a sharp bark and darted toward the trees. I called after him, but he was gone. Millie barked and followed. I chased them both, heart pounding, boots slipping in the soft ground. I found them in a small hollow, under the rusted frame of an old pickup. There, crouched in the dark, was a golden retriever. Skinny, dirty, but alive, Sunny. She trembled as I approached, but didn't growl or run. Chance stood beside her still, like he was offering a promise. Millie sat at a respectful distance, tail wagging slowly. I crouched and spoke softly. It's okay, girl. You're safe now. It took a few minutes, but she let me slip a leash around her neck. Her legs were weak. I carried her part of the way back. When we returned to the truck, I called the number. The man cried on the phone. They met me at the clinic 10 minutes later. Sunny's tail wagged when she saw them, weak but full of light. The woman dropped to her knees and hugged her. The man shook my hand with both of his. I can't thank you enough, he said. Thank him, I said, nodding toward Chance. They bent down and hugged him too. Millie got a treat from the receptionist for her help. That night, the three of us curled up on the couch together. Chance on one side, Millie sprawled across my legs. I turned off the TV and just listened to the sound of their breathing. Saving Sunny didn't change the world, but it changed something in us. It reminded me that we could still do good, that we still mattered. The next few weeks brought a kind of calm. We slipped into our rhythms again. Morning walks, afternoon play, lazy evenings. Chance had a vet checkup in February. They ran the usual tests, updated his shots. Dr. Blakely said he looked great. "He's doing better than we could have hoped," she said. I smiled. He always surprises us. Back at home, I noticed he was sleeping more. Nothing dramatic, just longer naps, deeper sleep. He still wagged his tail when Millie pounced on him, still perked up for walks. But there was a new heaviness in him. One night, I woke to find him standing at the back door, staring out at the yard. I opened it for him, and he stepped outside, slow and deliberate. He didn't wander, just stood there, sniffing the air. I stepped out beside him. The moonlight cast everything in silver. Frost clung to the grass. I watched him take it all in. Then he looked up at me, and for a brief moment, I felt something pass between us, like he was trying to tell me something. But he just turned and went back inside. Spring came late. The snow melted in fits and starts. Chance and Millie chased the first bees of the season around the garden. I planted tulips near the porch and built a new bench by the trailhead. One afternoon, Ellie brought over a scrapbook she'd made, filled with photos of Chance. Him as a pup, him with Millie, him at the fundraiser. "I thought he should have a book," she said. We flipped through it together. She'd even included a section titled Chance's Favorite Things. The first page listed them in crayon. 1. Walks with Dad. 2. His blue ball. 3. Naps in the sun. 4. Millie 5. Chicken treats. I added a 6th. 6. Being loved by summer, Millie had grown into a sleek, spirited shadow. She never left Chance's side. They were a pair, always touching in some way, noses, tails, paws overlapping. She watched him like he was the sun, and he watched me. One evening, we took the long trail. The air was warm, the sky streaked with pink. Chance led as always, but slower now. Millie darted ahead, sniffing at everything. At the overlook, Chance lay down beside me, rested his head on my boot. I looked out over the town, the trees waving in the distance, and felt something shift. I wasn't ready, not yet, but I could feel it. We sat there for a long while. Then we walked home, slow and steady, under the falling light. The alarm buzzed faintly on the nightstand, but I was already awake. Not from noise or light, but from something quieter. A shift in rhythm. The kind you don't notice with your ears, but with your heart. Millie was curled up in her usual spot, legs twitching in some distant dream, but Chance wasn't on his bed beside mine. The space where he normally rested was empty. Cold. I sat up and looked around the room, no sign of him. I pulled on my hoodie and stepped into the hallway, calling his name softly. "Chance?" Silence. Then I heard it. A soft, wheezing breath from the kitchen. I found him lying near the back door. His head was resting on his paws, eyes open, but not in the usual way. This was something else. There was a stillness to him, even though he was breathing. His tail gave a lazy thump as I approached, but it was slow, tired. I knelt beside him, pressing my palm gently to his side. "You okay, buddy?" He blinked slowly, tried to lift his head, but it dropped again. I stayed with him until the sun came up. Millie eventually wandered in, her sleepy playfulness fading the moment she saw him. She nosed his ear and then sat beside me, close and quiet. Later that morning, I called Dr. Blakely. She offered to come by the house. Said she'd seen this kind of thing before. Something subtle, something deep. Not an emergency, but not something to ignore. When she arrived, Chance wagged his tail again. Just barely. She examined him on the living room rug, murmuring softly, her touch gentle. "He's not in pain," she said. "His heart sounds strong, but he's slowing down. Dogs like Chance, they've been through a lot. Sometimes their bodies carry memories like scars." She prescribed a new supplement. Recommended we adjust his diet. Shorter walks, more rest. Millie watched from the doorway the whole time. Her ears perked like she understood every word. That week, I shifted everything around. Brought his bed closer to the window where the sunlight was strongest in the mornings. Placed his water and food bowls a little closer so he wouldn't have to walk too far. Millie adapted right along with him. She stopped racing through the yard. Started walking at his pace. We still made it to the trail a few times, but not all the way to the overlook. Just far enough for him to sniff the trees and feel the breeze. I began waking up earlier. Made it a habit to sit with him before the house came alive. Those moments, as the sky shifted from gray to gold, became sacred. I'd talk to him in whispers, sometimes reading the paper aloud or telling him stories from work. He always listened, even if his eyes stayed closed. Then, one afternoon in July, something unexpected happened. The doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Most folks just stopped by unannounced if they needed something. When I opened the door, I found a young man standing there, maybe in his late 20s, tall, nervous, holding a small duffel bag. "Hi," he said. "Sorry to just show up. My name's Kyle. I think Chance used to be my dog." My first instinct was confusion, then caution, but I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. He reached into his bag and pulled out a photo, a grainy printout, a picture of a much younger Chance, barely a few months old, sitting in the passenger seat of an old Jeep. Same eyes, same markings. There was no doubt. "I got him from a shelter in Ohio," Kyle said. "Named him Tucker. I had him for almost a year. Then I had to leave for basic training. My roommate promised to take care of him. When I got back, they told me he'd run off. Said they looked, but I never found him." His voice cracked. He looked down. "I didn't even know he was alive until my mom saw the mural in that news segment. She sent it to me. I was quiet for a long time. Then I told him everything. About the road, the hospital, the days and nights that followed. He listened, didn't interrupt, just nodded slowly. "Can I see him?" I opened the door. Chance was lying by the fan in the living room. Kyle stepped in, kneeling beside him. "Hey, boy," he said softly. "It's me. Remember me?" Chance looked at him, blinked, then laid his head back down. Kyle smiled, a little sad. "I guess I'm a stranger now." "Not a stranger," I said. "Just someone from another part of his story." We talked for a while. Kyle stayed for dinner, played with Millie in the yard. He watched Chance from time to time, but didn't press anything. When he left, he shook my hand. "Thank you. For everything." He came back a few times after that. Just visits, never asked to take chance. He understood. Said he was grateful just to know he'd been loved. That he still was. Chance seemed to accept him in his own way. Always greeted him with a thump of the tail. Nothing more. Nothing less. As August turned to September, the air changed again. Cooler in the mornings. The leaves edged toward gold. One morning I sat on the porch with my coffee while Millie nosed through the grass and Chance lay beside me. The sky was that perfect soft blue that only shows up between seasons. A truck drove by, slowed down, stopped. It was Hank. He hadn't spoken to me much since the day he made that crack about Chance being a waste. But now he rolled down his window. Heard about what you did for that golden retriever and that soldier kid. I nodded. He cleared his throat. Took in a stray myself last week. Some mutt from the county shelter. Not sure what I'm doing, but figured it was time. I didn't say anything, just smiled. Anyway, he said, you were right. About him. He ain't a waste. Then he drove off that night. As I brushed Millie and laid a blanket over Chance, I thought about how far we'd come. How a single moment, a heartbeat on a road, had rippled through so many lives. But we weren't done yet, not even close. The first real frost of the season came early one morning in October. I stepped out to fetch the newspaper, still barefoot, and the chill bit into my soles with an eagerness that warned of what was coming. The grass sparkled like crushed glass, thin ice veining over puddles and windshields. I could see my breath as I exhaled, and when I opened the door again, Chance and Millie were waiting. Chance gave a low chuff as if to say, "It's too cold for that." And Millie pawed at the rug with mild impatience. I poured their breakfast, warm broth and a little leftover rice mixed in with kibble. Chance took his time eating now, moving slower, but still finishing it all. Millie, as usual, was done in less than a minute and immediately tried to nose her way into his bowl. He gave her a look, and she backed off with a guilty little bark. We had an appointment that day. Not for Chance or Millie, but for me. A routine checkup. Blood work. Nothing serious. I hadn't been in over a year, and Dr. Morrison's office had finally worn me down with reminders. Ellie offered to stay with the dogs while I went. She was older now, already starting her last year of high school. Talked about studying veterinary medicine, like Dr. Blakely. When I got back that afternoon, I could hear Millie barking before I even stepped out of the truck. But it wasn't panicked, it was excited. I walked in to find her racing circles around the kitchen, a trail of shredded napkins behind her. Ellie stood in the middle of it all, laughing. I looked away for 1 second, she said. 1. Chance sat nearby, watching like a tired chaperone at a playground. When he saw me, his ears perked slightly. I crouched down and rubbed his chest. You holding the fort, old man? His tail thumped once. Later that evening, after Ellie left and I cleaned up the mess, I noticed Chance staring at the back door again. He did that more often now, like he was waiting for something beyond the glass. Not necessarily someone, but something. Millie followed his gaze and sat beside him, as if standing watch. I joined them on the porch. The sky was fading into dusk, purples and oranges bleeding together like a slow fire. Chance rested his chin on my boot. It had become his preferred position, like it grounded him. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about time, how quietly it slips past. You blink and a year's gone. You look up one morning and realize your dog has gray around his muzzle where there used to be gold. It's a slow erosion, but unmistakable. The next morning we returned to the trail. Just a short walk. Chance didn't lead this time. I did. Millie ranged ahead, then circled back, then bounded off again, always returning. Chance walked slowly, stopping now and then to sniff a tree trunk or listen to a bird. His pace was steady but different, like he was being more careful with the ground beneath him. We didn't make it to the overlook. We stopped by the large flat rock halfway there. Chance lay down beside it and closed his eyes. I sat in the grass and let him rest. From the pocket of my jacket, I pulled out a letter. It was from Kyle. He'd mailed it a week earlier, along with a framed photo of Chance as a puppy in that same old Jeep. The letter was short, just a thank you. He'd started volunteering at a rescue shelter, said it felt right. Chance shifted, resting his head on his paw. "You changed more than just me, bud," I said. We sat there until the sun warmed the grass. Back at home, I found myself sorting through the closet in the spare room. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, just tidying up. I came across the old hoodie, the one I'd wrapped him in the day I wanted him. I hadn't worn it since. There were still faint stains on the fabric, reddish-brown, like a shadow that never fully faded. I held it for a long time before folding it and setting it aside. Later that week, Dr. Blakely called. She'd heard from the regional veterinary board. They wanted to interview us, not just about Chance, but about recovery stories in general. They were putting together a campaign to encourage adoption and were looking for ambassadors. "Nothing fancy," she said. "Just a few interviews, a couple of pictures. Chance would be perfect." I said yes. Not because of the spotlight, but because Chance had earned it. The shoot was scheduled for the following Thursday at a small park on the edge of town. Ellie came along to help. She brought the red bandana with gold trim, brushing it out and tying it around Chance's neck just before the camera crew arrived. The photographer, a soft-spoken woman named Laura, knelt down to his level and smiled. "Ready, handsome?" He tilted his head and wagged his tail. The pictures turned out beautifully. Chance sitting tall beneath an oak tree. Chance and Millie nose to nose. Chance resting against my leg, eyes half closed in the afternoon light. They even filmed a short clip of us walking down a path, Millie darting back and forth while Chance padded calmly beside me. Laura looked over the camera and grinned. "You'd be surprised how many dogs get nervous in front of a lens. But not him. He's a natural." "He's had plenty of practice," I said. That weekend, I received an invitation to speak at a local school. Ms. Jarvis, the 5th grade teacher, had seen the article in the Maple Gazette and wanted to know if Chance and I would come talk to the kids about rescue animals. Chance didn't love crowds, but kids were different. Their energy didn't rattle him. It warmed him. So we went. The classroom was decorated with construction paper leaves and hand-drawn pumpkins. 20 or so students sat on a big rug, cross-legged, whispering excitedly. When we walked in, they clapped. Ms. Jarvis introduced us, then asked if I'd like to say a few words. I kept it simple. Told them about that day on the road, about the hospital, about healing. When I finished, I asked if anyone had questions. One little girl raised her hand. "Did you know he was special when you found him?" I looked at Chance. He was lying down, eyes watching me. "No," I said. "I just knew he needed someone. Turns out, so did I." That earned a few soft gasps, and a few tears from the teacher. Afterward, the kids took turns petting Chance. One by one, they sat beside him, whispering things into his ears. Secrets, maybe, or wishes. Millie loved it too, lapped up the attention, tail wagging the whole time. Driving home, I glanced at Chance in the mirror. He was resting again. Millie curled up beside him. I thought about how full our lives had become. How a single act, stopping on the side of the road, had created this whole new world. The next few days passed quietly. The trees dropped their last leaves. Mornings came with mist, evenings with early dark. I started bringing the space heater into the living room for Chance. He preferred sleeping there now, near the fireplace. Millie still bounced around like a comet. But even she had learned to slow down when Chance needed it. She'd sit beside him during storms, share her toys, give up the sunny patch on the rug without being asked. One evening, I watched her curl up beside him and rest her chin on his back. He didn't move, just let her. That night, I wrote in a journal for the first time in years, not because I needed to remember, but because I wanted to give the story shape. I wrote about the road, the clinic, the mornings on the trail, the mural, Kyle, the golden retriever, the kids, and Chance, always Chance. Millie snored softly nearby, and I paused to look at them both. Then I turned back to the page. There was still more to write. By the time November settled in, the world around us had gone quiet. The mornings were dark and cold, with frost on the windows and the smell of firewood in the air. Maple Ridge slowed down this time of year. The leaves were gone, the farmers' markets closed, and the chatter at the diner turned from football to when the first real snow might hit. I found myself looking at the weather report more than usual, partly to plan around the cold, partly to know how much comfort I'd need to prepare so in the house for Chance. He was still with me every day, still walking when he could, still alert and full of that quiet awareness that always made him seem a little wiser than the rest. But I could see it now, the changes. Not just in how slowly he got up or how deeply he slept, but in the way he watched me. Like he wanted to make sure I was still there, still paying attention. Millie had grown into a strong, clever dog. Not quite a pup anymore, but still full of that wild light she'd had since I found her under the log. She kept us on a schedule, pacing in the hallway when it was time for breakfast, nudging my hand toward the leash when the sun came out. If I got too still, too thoughtful, she'd bring me her toy and force me into the world again. Chance didn't fetch anymore, but he loved to watch. He'd sit at the edge of the yard, tongue lolling out, watching Millie race in circles. Sometimes he barked once, maybe twice, like he was cheering her on. The sound was softer now, not as sharp as it used to be, but still full of him. One day, I was working on a new bench in the garage when Ellie stopped by. She had a paper bag in her hands and a knitted hat pulled low over her ears. "I brought sweet potato biscuits," she said, "for Chance. I found a recipe online. No wheat, no preservatives." She handed one to him, and he took it carefully, chewing slow, tail thumping the floor. Ellie sat with me while I sanded the edges of the bench. Millie lay near her feet, chewing on a pine cone. Chance settled beside the heater I kept running in the corner. "You know he's famous at school," she said, watching him. I chuckled. He'd probably hate that. Too late. We're using his story for our kindness project. Everyone had to pick something that makes the world better. I picked him. I set the sander down and looked at her. That's kind of perfect. He reminds people to care, even when they're tired, even when they're scared. Chance lifted his head and blinked at her like he knew. When she left, she kissed the top of his head and told him she loved him. Then she ran off into the late afternoon light, backpack bouncing. That evening, after the house had gone still and Millie had curled up in her usual spot by the couch, I found Chance lying in the hallway, his head resting on the floorboards. He didn't get up when I walked over, just blinked. I lay down beside him and pressed my hand to his side. "You've been teaching people how to love without even trying," I whispered. His eyes fluttered closed. We spent Thanksgiving with Dr. Blakely and her family. She had invited us weeks before and insisted we come, even if just for dessert. I brought a pecan pie. Chance and Millie rode in the truck bed, bundled in blankets. There were 20 people in the house, all ages. Kids ran through the rooms laughing. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and turkey. It was warm, loud, chaotic. Chance settled on a rug near the fireplace, unbothered by the noise. Millie stuck close to him, always watching. Everyone who walked by bent down to pet him. He never moved, just accepted it all with that quiet grace of his. I talked to strangers that night, neighbors of Karen's, cousins visiting from out of state. Every one of them seemed to know about Chance. "I read about him on the rescue group's newsletter," one woman said. "He's the reason my husband agreed to foster again." Another man pulled out his phone and showed me a picture of a hound he'd adopted. "We named him Lucky," he said, "because of Chance." I didn't know what to say, just nodded, overwhelmed in a way I couldn't put into words. Later, while the others drank coffee and played cards, I sat near the fireplace with Chance's head in my lap. I felt his breath, slow and deep, and I stayed like that for what felt like hours. Back home, the house was quiet again. Millie climbed onto the couch and fell asleep instantly. I tucked a blanket over Chance and sat beside him, one hand resting gently on his back. December crept in without much warning. The first snow fell just after midnight one weekend, blanketing the yard in soft white. I let the dogs out early the next morning. Millie bounded through the drifts, tail high, tossing snow with her nose. Chance walked carefully, placing his paws with intention. He made it halfway across the yard, stopped, then turned his face to the sky. Snowflakes landed on his nose and ears. He didn't shake them off. I took a photo from the porch, just him standing in the snow, looking up like he was listening for something only he could hear. I sent it to Ellie. She printed it and framed it at school. Later, she told me they hung it in the library. On a Saturday just before Christmas, I got a call from a woman named Karen Hill. She ran a rescue shelter one county over. She had a senior dog, part shepherd, part something else, who needed a foster home. The dog was shy, older, set in her ways. She asked if I'd be open to meeting her. I wasn't sure. The house felt full already, but I trusted Karen, so I said yes. She brought the dog by the next morning. Her name was Mags. White face, soft eyes, stiff joints. She stayed near the door, cautious but not scared. Chance approached first. Didn't sniff, didn't crowd her. Just sat down beside her like they'd known each other for years. Millie was more excitable. Tried to initiate play. Mags wasn't interested, but she didn't snap either. Just lay down slowly. After an hour, Karen nodded. I think this is her place. And so, Mags joined the family. She moved slowly, slept often, and had a bark like gravel. But she brought a new rhythm to the house. Chance seemed to accept her like he had accepted everything else, with patience and calm. The three of them would lay together by the fireplace in the evenings, forming a quiet circle of breath and warmth. On Christmas Eve, I sat by the window and watched the snow fall. Millie was chewing on a bone. Mags was curled up on her bed. Chance was watching the fire. I leaned back and whispered, "Merry Christmas, buddy." He didn't move, but I saw his ear twitch. That was enough. I didn't know what the new year would bring, but I knew what it had already given me. A life fuller than I ever imagined, and a dog who had taught me more about presents than any sermon or book ever could. That night, as the wind picked up and the windows frosted over, I pulled a blanket over Chance and sat beside him again. I read aloud from the journal, just a few pages. He always listened. Millie curled up at my feet. Mag sighed in her sleep. Outside, the world was cold and quiet, but inside, the fire glowed. The dogs breathed steady, and everything felt still. It was the second week of January when I noticed the rhythm of our mornings had changed. Not in some dramatic way. It was in the tiny things. Chance no longer stood at the door before sunrise like he used to. Millie would pace in the hallway waiting for me to get up, but he stayed curled on his bed. Sometimes, even after I called his name, he'd lift his head just enough to look at me, then slowly drop it back onto his blanket. I adjusted everything around him without hesitation. Instead of going out right away, I'd bring his breakfast to him. I swapped the bowls for shallower ones, so he didn't have to lower his neck too much. Millie and Mags caught on quickly, giving him space but always nearby, hovering in quiet solidarity. One morning I made him scrambled eggs, real ones, with a little bit of shredded chicken stirred in. I sat with him while he ate, hand on his back. His appetite was slower, but still there. He licked the plate clean, then nudged my hand. "Still with me," I said. "Still hungry. That's a good sign." That afternoon, I found myself staring at the calendar. I'd circled the date of his adoption, April 14th, in red ink the year before, and every year since I'd marked it with a different color. It was 3 months away now, and for the first time I felt the weight of whether he'd make it to that day. I didn't say that aloud. Not to Ellie, not to Dr. Blakely, not to the dogs. But it sat there, just beneath the surface of everything. Still, Chance continued doing the things he could. He walked out into the backyard every day, though never far. He sat near the porch and watched the squirrels. He gave Millie a playful nose nudge when she dropped a stick beside him. And when I laid down beside him one evening and whispered, "Want to go see the trail again?" His ears twitched. So we did. I brought a blanket for him and packed a thermos of warm broth. We took the truck halfway up the dirt road and parked near the edge of the ridge walk. I carried him the rest of the way. He didn't protest, just rested in my arms, his head tucked against my chest. Millie and Mags walked ahead, their breath coming out in white puffs. The trail was dusted in snow, the trees bare and silent. The only sound was the crunch of my boots and the occasional call of a distant crow. When we reached the flat rock, I laid the blanket down and sat with him cradled in my lap. He looked out over the valley like he always had, eyes alert, watching everything. I told him stories while we sat, about the golden retriever we helped find, about Ellie's college applications, about the day Mags tried to steal a turkey sandwich from the counter and got her nose stuck in a chip bag. His breathing was steady, slow but steady. We stayed there until the sun started sinking behind the hills. The next few weeks were quiet. I reduced my work hours and spent more time at home. I picked up puzzle books, started cooking more meals from scratch. Millie and Mags would curl up beside the fireplace most evenings. Chance preferred the hallway near the front door, where the heater blew warm air across the floorboards. One evening, I walked into the living room to find Ellie sitting on the floor beside Chance. She wasn't talking, just running her hand gently through the fur behind his ears. "He used to meet me at the door every time I came over," she said softly. "Now he waits until I'm already inside. But he still lifts his head. Every time." "He's still here," I said. "I know," she whispered, "but I can feel something changing." I didn't respond, just sat beside her and stroked his back. His tail tapped the floor once, then was still. February arrived with freezing rain and long nights. I bought extra blankets, sealed the windows, and made sure the generator was fueled just in case. We stayed inside more, watched the snow pile up through the window. One night, while the wind howled outside, I woke to a strange sound, a soft, rhythmic scraping. I got up, pulled on my robe, and stepped into the hall. Chance was dragging himself toward the back door, paws slipping slightly on the wood. I rushed to him and knelt down. Hey, what are you doing, huh?" He looked up at me, eyes bright but tired. I opened the door and helped him outside. He took a few steps into the snow-covered yard, then sat. Just sat there, staring at the moonlight as it spilled across the trees. I joined him, kneeling in the snow, hand resting on his side. We stayed there a while, just breathing. Eventually, I carried him back in and dried him off by the fire. After that night, he stopped trying to walk on his own. I carried him when he needed to go out, carried him to the sunny spot near the window, carried him to the car when we visited the vet. Dr. Blakely examined him carefully, listened to his heart for a long time. "He's not in pain," she said, "but he's growing tired. You'll know when it's time. He'll tell you." I nodded. That weekend, I found the old photo albums I hadn't opened in years. I set them on the coffee table, one by one. Chance lay nearby, his head resting on Millie's back. She didn't move. The pictures traced our time together, from that first broken day on the road to the mural outside the vet's office, from the fundraiser to the trail, from holidays to summer naps. Chance was there in all of them, watching, always watching. I made copies of my favorite pictures, framed one of him in the snow, looking up, framed another of him and Millie curled together on the rug. Ellie stopped by and helped me hang them in the hallway. She brought new biscuits, this time pumpkin and oat. "He only ate half," she said, "but he still licked my hand afterward." That night, I sat beside him again. "You're doing so good, buddy," I whispered. "You're doing so good." He shifted slightly, and I let him rest his head in my lap. Millie curled up on the other side, her body pressed close. Mag settled in at our feet, her breathing slow and heavy. Outside, the snow kept falling, soft and slow. I stayed right where I was, surrounded by warmth, holding on to the sound of their breaths and the steady beat of the moment. The wind rolled over the fields outside town that morning, bending the dry winter grasses and rattling bare tree limbs against the overcast sky. The clouds hung low and silver, like a blanket pressed down too close to the earth. I had let the fire die out during the night, and the house had the particular stillness of cold. Quiet, breathless, respectful. I rose slowly, careful not to disturb the pile of warmth on the rug where Chance lay tucked between Millie and Mags. I brewed the coffee, one hand always keeping close to the counter for balance. The mornings had become a kind of ritual, the heater humming, the steam from the pot rising, and the soft scuffle of dog paws as the household slowly stirred. Millie was up first, as always, giving a long yawn and stretch before padding over to lean against my leg. Mags followed, slower but steady, tail sweeping the floor. Chance didn't move yet. I brought his breakfast to him. Warm rice and shredded turkey, just the way he liked it now. He sniffed it, blinked up at me, then took a few bites, chewing slow. Millie watched from a distance, and I offered her a few of her own biscuits, so she wouldn't hover too close. The snow outside was beginning to crust with a thin sheen of ice. Another storm was coming. The forecast said it would last through the weekend. I stocked up in advance. Firewood, propane, groceries. I added extra blankets to every room, and I made sure Chance's bed was close to the largest heater vent. He liked warmth more than anything now. Sometimes I found him lying with his nose pointed directly at the hot air stream, eyes half-lidded in contentment. That afternoon, I decided to reorganize the shed. It had been weeks since I'd done anything with tools, and the cabinets waiting in the corner needed to be finished by the end of February. I left the door cracked open so the dogs could come and go. Millie came to sit with me, chewing on an old glove she'd found. Mags lay in the patch of sunlight by the door. Chance remained in the house, sleeping. Every few minutes I looked up from my work, eyes drifting toward the back window where I could see the edge of his pen. I told myself it was just to check the light, or the wind, or the dogs, but I knew better. I was counting his breaths from a distance. When I finished rearranging the lumber, I walked back inside. He lifted his head as I entered. Not high, not quickly, just enough. "You holding down the fort?" I asked. He blinked, a slow, tired blink. I sat beside him on the floor, my back against the wall, and we stayed like that. Millie eventually joined us, resting her chin on my knee. Mag settled nearby, ears twitching. The storm came that evening, not with drama, but with a hush. The sky turned pale blue and then gray, the air thick with stillness. Snowflakes began to fall just after sunset, soft and dry, swirling against the windows. I lit the fireplace and turned off the overhead lights. The living room glowed in gold and orange, and the shadows on the walls flickered like slow-moving waves. Ellie stopped by briefly. She didn't come in, just left a small package on the porch. A new bandana for Chance. It was navy blue with tiny gold stars stitched into the corners. Inside the package was a note, written in her careful handwriting. "For the bravest soul I've ever known." I tied it around his neck that night, brushing back the fur under his chin as gently as I could. He licked my hand once and rested his head on the blanket again. That weekend passed in silence. No visitors, no errands. Just snow and wind and the occasional creak of the house adjusting itself against the cold. I didn't mind. I liked being sealed inside with them. It felt like the world had narrowed to just this space, this warmth, these breaths. Sunday afternoon, I brought the old photo boxes out of the closet. Millie sniffed them, then laid down at my feet. I sorted through the snapshots, spreading them on the rug near the fire. There were more than I remembered. Chance as a puppy, sleeping with his paws in the air. Chance in the back of the truck, nose pressed to the glass. Chance sitting proudly with his new bandana after the fundraiser. Mags eventually wandered over and lay down on one of the pictures. It was a shot of all three of them curled on the couch, noses touching. I didn't move her. That night, I made soup. Chicken and carrots, the way my mother used to make. I ladled out a small bowl for Chance and let it cool before setting it beside him. He ate some of it. Not much, but he licked the bowl afterward. I considered calling Dr. Blakely, just to check in, but I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I sat beside him and read aloud. I read a few pages from a collection of short stories, then a letter from Kyle that had arrived just after the holidays. He wrote about the dog he was fostering, an older beagle named Clara. Said she was sweet but scared, and that Chance had helped him understand how to be patient. He showed me that not every dog needs to be fixed, the letter said. Some just need to be loved the way they are. I folded the letter and placed it in the journal. By Tuesday, the storm had passed. The snow outside was deep and glassy, unbroken except for the small paths I'd cleared to let Millie and Mags out. Chance had stayed in all day, curled up by the heater. I carried him outside that evening to let him breathe fresh air. The sky was clear, the stars sharp and still. He looked up, watched the clouds drift past the moon. I wrapped him tighter in the blanket and whispered, "I wish I could keep this moment forever." Back inside, I cleaned the living room while the dogs rested, folded blankets, swept, put away the mugs and refilled the water bowls. Every movement was deliberate, quiet, measured. Before bed, I placed a hand on each of them. Millie was warm and strong, twitching in a dream. Mags snored softly. And Chance, he breathed in, then out. I watched the rise and fall of his ribs, felt the warmth of him. That was enough, at least for tonight. It was Thursday morning when the world seemed to tilt just slightly. I woke up before the sun, as I always did. The floor was cold beneath my feet, and the house was dark, the kind of dark that sinks in deeper during winter. I put on the kettle, cracked the back door just enough to let in the scent of snow. The wind was still asleep. Everything was still. Millie came padding into the kitchen, tail wagging softly, stretching out her back legs with a little yawn. She nosed my hand and trotted to the hallway. Mags was slower, but soon behind her, tongue lolling, content. I poured the water and watched the steam rise, waiting. But I didn't hear Chance. I walked into the hallway, mug in hand, and there he was, curled tightly in his blanket near the heater, just as he had been the night before. His body lay still, the rise and fall of breath not immediately visible. I knelt slowly, one hand gently pressing to his side. Warm, breathing, but faint. Shallow. His eyes fluttered as I touched him, then opened halfway. There was no panic, no distress, just quiet. Millie sat down beside him and let out a low, quiet whine. I carried him into the living room and set him by the fire, cradling him in a thick fleece blanket. He didn't resist. Mags came and lay down close. Millie followed, curling tight against his belly. I sat behind him, one leg stretched out, the other bent so I could prop his head up gently in my lap. I stroked his ears, humming a tune I didn't even realize I remembered. The sun rose slowly, pale gold, gentle. The fire crackled. Time moved differently in that room. No clocks, no obligations, just the soft sounds of breathing, the rhythm of the wind against the glass. Around 9, I called Dr. Blakely. She didn't ask questions. "I'll come to you," she said. I texted Ellie. I knew she'd want to be here. Dr. Blakely arrived first. Her coat pulled tight against the cold. She knelt beside Chance, hands calm, steady. She didn't say much, just placed her stethoscope gently, listened, nodded. "He's peaceful," she whispered, "but he's close." Ellie came in just after. Her eyes were already red. She dropped to her knees beside him and kissed the top of his head. "I love you," she said, over and over. "I love you. I love you." We all sat with him. No one rushed. No one tried to change the quiet. At some point, Dr. Blakely looked at me. "It's up to you," she said. I looked down at him. His body was relaxed. No pain, but tired. He opened his eyes once more, just slightly, and met mine. It wasn't a look that asked for more time. It was one of acknowledgement, of having given and received all he could. I nodded. Dr. Blakely prepared everything with care. Ellie held his paw. I held his head. And as the fire warmed the room, as the wind moved gently against the side of the house, Chance let out one final soft breath. The world didn't break. It paused. And then it continued. I buried him that afternoon, on the ridge, the same overlook where we'd sat so many times, where he had once stood tall despite the cold, watching the town below as if guarding something sacred. I wrapped him in the hoodie, the same one I'd carried him in all those years ago. Ellie tucked in the photo she'd framed of him in the snow. Millie brought his blue ball and placed it by his side. Mag sat still, like she understood. We said nothing during the burial. There was nothing left to say. Only the sound of wind through the bare trees and the quiet thump of the shovel. Afterward, we sat there, just sat. The sky was clear. The town below looked small, soft. I could smell the wood smoke from distant chimneys. When we finally returned to the house, it was twilight. The bed near the heater was empty. I didn't move it. That night, Millie whined softly and pawed at the spot. I laid down beside her, pulling the blanket up over both of us. Mags curled on the other side. I didn't sleep much. The days that followed were slow. I kept moving because I didn't know how not to. I finished the cabinets I'd been putting off, delivered them to the clients, took on a new order, walked the trail again, even when it hurt. Carried the thermos like I always had, sat on the overlook. Millie was quieter, slept closer to me. Mags didn't leave my side for days. I took comfort in their warmth. The mail started coming in by the third day. Cards, letters, small packages, some from people I knew, some from strangers. One envelope had no return address. Inside was a single sentence. He was your miracle, but he became ours too. I framed it. Ellie asked if we could hold a small service. Not formal, just friends. So we did. One Sunday, under the pale blue sky, we gathered by the ridge. A dozen people stood in a semicircle. Dr. Blakely, the couple who'd lost and then found Sonny, Kyle, even Hank from next door. He didn't speak, but he brought flowers and stood beside us the whole time. Ellie read a short poem. I said nothing. I didn't need to. As we left, Kyle placed a carved wooden plaque at the foot of the stone. It read, "Still here." Winter faded. The snow melted slowly. The birds came back, and the morning started earlier. Millie was more herself again, chasing shadows, barking at deer in the distance. Mags spent her time sunbathing on the porch. I built a bench for the overlook, set it facing the ridge. Some mornings I'd see new footprints in the snow around the grave. Visitors. I never asked who. I never minded. Spring bloomed with soft colors. Ellie graduated. She gave a speech at her ceremony and mentioned Chance. Said he'd taught her that gentleness was not weakness, and that caring deeply for others was the bravest thing anyone could do. I watched from the bleachers, held Millie's leash in one hand. That night, we sat by the fire again. Me, Millie, Mags. I opened the journal, read the first entry, then the last. He was in every word. I didn't stop writing. I started a new notebook. This time, for the life that continued. For Millie's adventures. For Mags's quiet days. For the foster dog we took in later that summer. A scrappy, half-blind terrier who refused to stay off the couch. Chance had opened that door, and he was still here, in all the ways that mattered. One morning in late May, as the sun lit up the porch and the air smelled of honeysuckle, Millie dropped her blue ball at my feet. I picked it up, smiled, and tossed it across the yard. She ran, wild, fast, joyful, and I could have sworn, just for a moment, that I saw him there too, running beside her, tail high, free,